brand new series. It's 1 Samuel, if you want to kind of get there in your Bibles in advance. I'm doing chapters 1 to 3, won't be reading absolutely every word, but that's where we are. And I've called today Being Radical in the Face of the Unchangeable. And hopefully that will make sense as I go through. Now, I was a teenager in the 80s, which obviously was the best time to be a teenager. If you were a teenager in the 80s, you'd clearly agree. If you look back on the 80s now on TV, it's full of bright colours, Rubik's Cubes, crazy hair, massive mobile phones, and lots of fun. That's what the 80s looks like on TV now. It wasn't quite like that when I was there, I've got to say. My recollections are a bit different. I remember the Falklands War, I remember the miners' strike, and the music, maybe it was just me, I was listening to some kind of depressing music when I look back at it at the time. And I don't know, it was like the music was, this is life, and it's never going to change. It was that kind of music. I'm sure you can listen to that kind of music now. I'll give you some examples, because you might not be from the 80s, you might not know what I'm talking about. Talking Heads, Rare on a Road to Nowhere. You remember that one? Anybody remember that? Yeah. Tracy Chapman, Fast Car. It's got glimpses of hope as you go through the song, and at the end it says, I got no plans, I ain't going nowhere. Take your fast car and keep on driving. Oh. And then, you might not know this one, even if you were in the 80s, you might know it. Dalamitri, I heard this song on the radio, and I liked it so much, I bought the album. I can't understand what I was thinking. This song was called Nothing Ever Happens. And the chorus went like this: nothing ever happens, nothing happens at all. The needle returns to the start of the song, and we all sing along like before. And we'll all be lonely tonight and lonely tomorrow. I mean, how depressing is that? Yeah, exactly. So maybe some of the things from the 80s are best forgotten. But what do you do when history or circumstances say that things can't be changed? That's where I'm going to. What do we do in the face of what seems unchangeable? Do we lie down and accept it? Or do we get radical and stand up and fight it? Mark was mentioning communities. We were praying in our community last week for somebody's relative who's got cancer, bowel cancer, and these were the two options on the table. Option 1, no chemo, 6 months. Option 2, chemo, 2 years. What do you do when you're praying for something like that? We prayed for that guy in that situation, and we also prayed for option 3. God heals him. Because we've got a God who can do the impossible, who raises the dead and gives sight to the blind and helps the lame walk and gives us new life and pours out the Spirit on all believers. That's our God. We didn't just take those 2 options. We prayed for a new option. As I was preparing for this, I was reminded of the Serenity Prayer. Which of you guys have heard the Serenity Prayer? You might recognise it when I say it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Now, if you like that prayer, I'm not trying to upset you. But there's something soporific about it, sleep-inducing about it. Help me to accept the things I cannot change. Part of me doesn't want to accept the things I can't change. Part of me wants fire in my belly. Part of me wants to be radical and say, no, I'm not accepting that. Because I've got a God who can do the impossible. There's a war in Ukraine at the moment. It's been going on a while. Feels like it's a stalemate, honestly, at the moment. Nothing seems to be going anywhere. They're just at each other, not really taking much ground. I'm not accepting it. I know there's nothing I can do personally, but I'm praying. I've been praying out of Psalm 36. Sin whispers to the wicked deeper than their hearts. They have no fear of God at all. In their blind conceit, they cannot see how wicked they really are. Pour out your unfailing love on those who love you. Give justice to those with honest hearts. Look, those who do evil have fallen. They have thrown down, never to rise again. That's what I'm praying. I'm praying, God, help Putin come to his senses and pull back. And if he won't, throw him down. Because thousands of people are dying. But sometimes it's not so easy, especially when it's personal. I've mentioned this before. I hurt my ankle running last year. I actually checked on my laptop today. Amazingly, it's a year to the day I hurt my ankle running, April the 16th. And I still can't run. If I'm honest, I can't even walk fast. That's where my ankle is at. Nikki can now walk faster than me. It's very surprising for her that she has to slow down for me sometimes. What do I do? Do I lie down and take it? Do I keep fighting it? What do you do? You know, we've all got our things that cannot change. And when things are long term, whether it's health or work or relationships, they seem insurmountable. And there are times when you have to accept those things. But there are also times when God's saying, don't give up. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Don't give in. We're kicking off our series on one side, and we're looking at Hannah. Now, when I remembered Hannah, I remembered a woman who wanted a baby and had tears. That's what I remembered. And when I reread it, I discovered a woman who was radical and would not accept the unchangeable. That's what we're looking at today. Right. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zoph in the hill country of Ephraim. He was the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zoph of Ephraim. Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Each year Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Peninnah and each of her children, and though he loved Hannah, he would give her only one choice portion, because the Lord had given her no children. So Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her, because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask. Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? I'm reading from the New Living Translation, by the way, if you're wondering which translation I'm in. I want to put some things in context. First off, it's not okay to have 2 wives. Okay, I just want to get that out there. It's not what we're preaching as a church. Jesus said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, 2 will become one flesh. But in that culture, it was accepted. Actually, it was a bit of a sign that Alchemy was probably a bit well off to be able to have 2 wives, support 2 wives and their families. You might be wondering if it was okay to go to Shiloh to worship rather than Jerusalem, which might be what you're accepting. Actually, might be what you're expecting. And that is okay. Later on in the story, David's going to build a temple in Jerusalem. But right now, the tabernacle, the tent with the Ark of the Covenant in it, is in Shiloh. And it's been there since Joshua took the Promised Land. So that's what's going on there. Okay, I'm going to carry on reading. Once, after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow: O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. And as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she'd been drinking. Must you come here drunk? He demanded. Throw away your wine. Oh no, sir, she replied. I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged. And I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. Hannah's situation looked unchangeable. Year after year, it was the same. God had kept her from having children, and Peninnah is digging her about it all the time. But Hannah does not accept it. If you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. That is a radical prayer. Now, in the law, the first fruits of every harvest belong to God. And the firstborn male of everything, animal or human, belonged to God. Because it was God who brought life. Mark mentioned tithing earlier. Part of the reason we tithe, we're not under law, but part of the reason we tithe is a recognition that all good things have come to us from God. He is our provider. We are dependent on him. You know, we're not planting crops anymore and raising flocks anymore, but it's still the truth that he is our provider. And when I'm tithing, in a sense, I'm not giving him the first part of my income. I'm giving him the first part of his provision to see the difference there. Anyway, every firstborn male belongs to God. And what God does is say, rather than that happening, in place of Israel's firstborn sons, the Levites will serve in the temple. And what Hannah is doing is saying, rather than taking that deal, I'm going to give you, God, my firstborn son. I am so sure that my son's life comes from you, that I'm giving him back to you. and he will be dedicated to you. This is radical. This is like Abraham taking Isaac up the mountain. This is like God giving his one and only son. I mean, this is extraordinarily radical. And then she hears the blessing of Eli, and faith comes into her heart. And she knows God has heard her, and God is going to answer her prayer. And from that moment on, she's not sad, she goes away, she eats some food, because she knows something has changed. Wow, didn't click. Could you go on to the next slide? Anyway, that section was called the radical prayer. The next section is called the radical song. I'm going to carry on reading. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him. The next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and to keep his vow. But Hannah did not go. She told her husband, wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently. Whatever you think is best, Elkanah agreed. Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise. So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. Sir, do you remember me? Hannah asked. I am the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worshipped the Lord there. Then Hannah prayed, my heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me. No one is holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Stop acting so proud and haughty. Don't speak with such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows what you have done. He will judge your actions. The bow of the mighty is now broken, and those who stumbled are now strong. Those who were well fed are now starving, and those who were starving are now full. The childless woman now has 7 children, and the woman with many children wastes away. The Lord gives both death and life. He brings some down to the grave, but raises others up. The Lord makes some poor and others rich. He brings some down and lifts others up. He lifts the poor from the dust and the needy from the garbage dump. He sets them among princes, placing them in seats of honor. For all the earth is the Lord's, and he has set the world in order. He will protect his faithful ones, but the wicked will disappear in darkness. No one will succeed by strength alone. Those who fight against the Lord will be shattered. He thunders against them from heaven. The Lord judges throughout the earth. He gives power to his king. He increases the strength of his anointed one. Then Elkanah returned home to Ramah without Samuel, and the boy served the Lord by assisting Eli the priest. Now, this is what's been happening in Israel ever since the Israelites entered the Promised Land. The Israelites would forget about God, they'd get invaded, they'd remember God, God would send a judge who would rescue them. Whilst the judge was around, they'd follow God. Once that judge had passed on, they'd forget about God, and actually the cycle would complete. 400 years, more or less, what had been going on. That must have seemed like that was just life. That was the unchangeable thing. That is not what Hannah's song is about. Hannah is singing a song about change. The rich and the arrogant are going to get brought down. The poor and the humble are going to get lifted up. The faithful ones are going to be protected. The wicked are going to disappear into darkness. Those who fight God are shattered. And God gives power to his king. Now think about that for a second. There is no king. There is no king at this point. It's the time of judges. This is a prophecy. In a few chapters, the Israelites are going to ask for a king so they can be like everybody else. That is a rubbish thing to ask for. But God has already got a more radical plan. He's going to give them a king empowered and anointed by God himself. That is the radical prayer and the radical song of Hannah. I've got another section about Samuel. I'm just going to summarise it for you. Eli was the priest. His sons were bad, basically. My translation says scoundrels. I think that's understating it. They're serving as priests, but they've got no respect for God. They're using their position to forcibly steal people's offerings. They're seducing women at the front of the temple and sleeping around. And Eli has become complicit in all of this. He has let them get away with it, and he has been eating the offerings they've been stealing. Samuel grows up in that family. That is not a good environment to be growing up in. But something of Hannah's radicalness is in Samuel, and he does not follow that path. He is radical in himself, and God starts to speak to him. And rather than taking the easy route, he is faithful with every message that God gives him, and he passes it on. And so God keeps on using him and keeps on speaking to him. Even when he has to tell Eli that God is going to bring judgment against him and his family, Samuel does it. But I've just contracted a whole section because I wanted to get to the application of all of this. There is a radicalness that is birthed in God's presence. Hannah's radical prayer is as she is worshipping in the temple. Samuel hears God as he sleeps in front of the tabernacle. I'm not talking about raging against everything. That's not the radicalness I'm talking about. I'm talking about the times when you hear God and he speaks faith about something that looks like it can't be changed. And you can see past it to where God has changed it. That's the radicalness I'm talking about. Even if nobody else can see it, you can see it. Even if it looks like it can't be changed, faith comes and you know it can be changed. That's the kind of radicalness I'm talking about. The stuff that's birthed in God's presence. This is a radicalness that changes our own lives. It's easy to be radical for somebody else, but when God speaks, it changes us. Each of us was radical at the point at which we became Christians. Jesus said to the crowd, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. If you give up your life for my sake, you will save it." You have been radical. Probably many times in your life, but at least once when you became a Christian. Is God calling you to be radical about something again? I talked about that serenity prayer and how it feels just a bit soporific to me. The psalmist says, "Awake my soul, awake my soul." Is God calling you to awake? There is a radicalness that inspires others. At the point of leaving Samuel at the temple, I don't know what I'd have been like in that situation. At that point, Hannah is worshipping and praising God and saying, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me." And Hannah's husband is inspired by her radicalness. He's on board with this decision. It wasn't just down to her, his son as well, but her faith and her radicalness inspires him. I want us to finish in worship, but really, I want that to be us to have space for God to speak to us. Is there something in me that I have just accepted that God's saying, "I want you to no longer accept that, but to stand and fight it and be radical"? That's what I'm asking us to ask God and to pray about as we finish in worship. If you want prayer, we will pray for you. I will pray for you, Mark will pray for you, any of the community leaders will pray for you. We can pray. But I want us to do business with God. And if God is speaking to you about changing something and having fire and being radical, then don't let it go. Take hold of it and be radical.